Good evening. We think we've got it nailed tonight, we hope. It says that we're live, so let's hope we are. And let's hope that those of you who want to hear us can find us. So just the apology again from Sunday night. We don't know what we were doing wrong, but we were using Facebook software to do a Facebook Live and the Go Live button just didn't work. So now we've gone to StreamYard, and this seems to be a much easier platform to work with. So hopefully we won't have any issues in the future. So we want to do these live streams every so often, maybe once a month, just to chat about some of the things that we're finding interesting about plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine. And that's great. Thanks, Christine and Melinda, to let us know that you can hear us. That's fantastic. And I hope our sound is all right. I'm using a new laptop, so that might have been some of the issues the other night. I don't know. So Malcolm has a few things that he wants to talk about, and then we'll come to questions. And I know I've already got a couple of questions that people have asked me, that you're welcome to post questions in the comments, and we'll get to them. So
some of this discussion comes out of us finally getting around to watching all 4 episodes of What You Eat, the twin study. And if you're not familiar with this, this is a recent 4-part documentary series based on a real study, which has a real published scientific paper out of it. And we think we'll have other papers published from the data from the same study. And this study tried to look at what would happen if people just changed to a vegan diet for 8 weeks. And they wanted to iron out some of the genetic differences. And so what better way to do it than to get a whole lot of sets of identical twins, people who have the same genes, only a slightly different epigenome perhaps, and often have a similar sort of lifestyle and upbringing, and to take each twin pair of identical twins and randomly assign one to the vegan diet and give them a lot of help, basically provide them with the food to start with, but later in the study to have them go out and prepare the food and buy them food themselves. And for the other twin, not just to stay on the omnivore diet, but to actually try and eat a healthier omnivore diet. So some interesting results on that. It certainly wasn't a whole foods plant-based diet, and yet the twin in each pair who had assigned to the vegan diet, they did get some changes in just those 8 weeks, including a significant drop in cholesterol, positive changes in gut microbiome, and some interesting sort of telomere epigenetic changes that sort of suggested that they looked younger than their identical twin omnivore at the end of the study. And this was we didn't think it was a super healthy whole foods plant-based diet that they showed in the documentary. It's not what we would eat. It's not what we teach in our immersion event. Nevertheless, they still got these significant changes. And I guess this sort of backs up a lot of data that's been coming out in many studies in the last few years that indicate that a vegetarian or vegan diet gets much better health outcomes. And of course, the naysayers out there will be going, oh, yeah, but if you change to a vegan diet and it's not a healthy vegan diet, if you're not eating healthy vegan food, you actually do much worse. This didn't seem to be the case in the studies, in this twin study. It seemed that even a pretty average sort of vegan diet where you just try and replace some of the meat-based foods with plant-based alternatives, still got better results, which suggests that the negative effects of meat, of animal protein foods, animal products on the body is quite big, quite significant. I think some of what for me came out of this documentary because the documentary did more than just follow the twins. You know, they talked about the environmental and the health effects, and presented, you know, a lot of other information in the four-part documentary series. But one of the big pushes in the world, people of the world, people moving away from a diet with a lot of animal products, particularly red meat, because you know the environment just can't sustain it. As was reported by the Eat Lancet Commission several years ago, who said, look, to feed 10 billion people sustainably in 2050, it's got to be mostly plant-based. And again, it was expressed in this documentary that a lot of people saying, well, we need to find plant alternative proteins. We need alternative proteins. Like people, you know, it's sort of like the limiting factor in nutrition is thought to be protein, which is not really the case. You know, it's calories more than anything. Anyway, I've got a few props here. I've got some alternative, some plant-based proteins, but basically the whole idea of the alternative proteins is to try and reconstitute plant parts, often with very processed food, that sort of becomes more similar to meat and dairy. The very foods we know that actually damage people's health, that have a huge excess of protein, that you know worsens blood sugar control, has effects on cholesterol, damages kidneys. It's not really what we want, but there seems to be a big thrust in finding alternatives to the standard Western diet. And I sort of understand why they did it. Um, the idea that if you make the food more familiar, you know, just sort of replace like in the Game Changers documentary, where they sort of had buffalo wings just made out of cauliflower instead of chicken. And I understand it sort of makes it look more acceptable to people. The idea is it makes it easier. But the downside or the other side of that is it's not always the healthiest way to go. And if the processed food industry, if the fast food industry had that same philosophy, we've got to make things exactly the same, then, you know, Macca's would be serving a drive-through with meat and three veg, like, you know, back in 1940, and there'd be no UPF foods. They'd be all familiar. So the food industry obviously doesn't knows that people can change. Anyway, I brought along a few sort of plant-based protein alternatives, and I've got some black beans here, and I've got some Australian oats. And you'll notice over here that it even says source of protein. You know, the proportion of protein, if you ate enough calories of this, you would get enough protein. In fact, if you eat enough calories of this, the potato, you would still get enough protein. You'd have to eat a lot of potatoes though, because they're you know, not all that high in calories. Um, So I guess that's sort of some of the issues I have with these. Whenever I see that discussion of, you know, plant-based proteins, alternative proteins, I'm sort of almost a bit confused about it because we really don't need to go looking for these processed foods, for these meat, dairy lookalikes. We just need to take these basic plant-based ingredients and make them delicious. And we thought our meal was delicious this evening. It was sort of a stir fry, you know, it had onions and garlic and a bit of chili, and it did have a little bit of peanut paste in it. It was a tofu dish, but you know, there were little pieces of stir fried tofu. It was predominantly vegetable. And it went on some nice steamed jasmine brown rice with a bit of wild rice among it. And there were a few steamed vegetables, you know, the green of broccoli and the purple. We had some purple cauliflower. So it was really quite picturesque and we thought very tasty. We didn't feel like we needed to have some sort of artificial meat analog to go with it. Um, so that's really what I wanted to talk about tonight, about the fact that when you look at all this research coming out, it looks like plant-based diets are far healthier. Even not super whole plant-based diets still get health benefits over omnivore diets. And this push for plant-based protein alternatives, um, sort of is somewhat based on the misconception that the excess amount of protein in that piece of chicken or whatever needs to be replaced by some similar excess of protein from a processed plant food.
Well, I mean, it's also the whole focus on protein when it's calories that people might be deficient in, not protein. Like, who in our world is protein deficient?
So I think Michael Greger in a recent video said that only 97% of the US gets enough protein. People that don't get enough protein, I mean,
Not getting enough calories.
theoretically you could eat oil and sugar, but generally they're people who are, not getting enough calories for one reason or other.
So yes, Wendy's commented that it was a great, definitely some positives to plant-based diet, but the disappointing result was the loss of muscle for the twin on a plant-based diet. So she's concerned, as someone who weight trains 4 days a week, that this is a constant struggle.
Only really one twin, wasn't it? I mean, there was one set of twins. He said that he'd moved house something like 6 times and had a young child and didn't do the exercise. So, that particular pair, you can sort of rule that out. I mean, I think the science is pretty clear on the exercise that you can pile in protein, you can take branched chain amino acids to try and upregulate mTOR, but none of it seems to make much difference. If there's one key factor or two key factors for building muscle, one is working the muscles with resistance type exercise, and the second part is eating enough calories, which will include enough protein. And if you're training hard and eating more, then it'll be easy to meet the slightly higher protein recommendations that apply to young athletes gaining a lot of muscle, or people like me who are old athletes not gaining a lot of muscle but working out a lot. But hey, if I work out more, I eat more, so I will get a bit more protein. And even if we look at the baseline protein intake of a fairly sedentary person eating some of these amazing protein sources here, you generally find that they'll be, up well up in the range of protein intake per body weight. Although there are plenty of growers out there who sort of give you ridiculous numbers for how much protein one needs, and it just doesn't match with the science that does say that if you're gaining muscle fast and working hard, you need a bit more protein, but nothing like the ridiculous quantity that some of the bodybuilding pros suggest.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about the pushback that we've witnessed. And there was on Sunday when we were going to do this, there was something you were reading in your newspaper.
There was something I was reading in the Age newspaper, and we've seen a lot of pushback in the last year against lifestyle medicine and plant-based nutrition. And I understand where some of it comes from. It is that, if I go out there and say, look, all that smoking, you're getting lung cancer, it's like the people whose relative got lung cancer who is a non-smoker will be really upset. And the person who was a smoker, will get blamed for the lung cancer. And this body positive movement, they've got some good points. Like, in most cases, these are not people who have sort of who have just been gorging themselves all day. And anyway, we're in an environment that's really obesogenic, and while we shouldn't shame people any more than we could shame for having excess body fat, any more than we should put shame and say it's all personal responsibility for someone who has high cholesterol or high blood pressure. We should tell the truth and tell them that it is the food. Now, it's not your fault that the authorities told you to eat lots of chicken and pour olive oil on you, and everywhere you went there was calorie dense, rich, hyper palatable food all around you, and you're someone who's prone to gaining weight. But if you come to us and ask for information about this, then we'll help to empower you to better your health. And for all those conditions, whether it's the body fat or the cholesterol or the blood pressure. You know, it's all the same approach. It's all the same sort of food approach, very similar. And we understand it can be very hard. You can have all the knowledge and it can still be hard. But to have articles like from the CEO of Australian Diabetes Society sort of say people with type 2 diabetes get shamed for having it because maybe they do. I don't think I shame anyone in my medical practice when they have type 2 diabetes. Um, and sort of said that it made it out to be largely genetic. Um, and this is not true at all. And this actually disempowers the people with that condition to go, okay, so it's really about lifestyle. And I was following all the recommendations and eating all that chicken and eggs, and the oil made me gain weight. Ah, I get it now. I don't just need to eat less. I actually need to eat more of the healthy whole plant foods. Um, but we've been seeing this a lot in from different angles. Or someone else quite a few months ago to do with mental health and said you can't eat your way out of depression. And it's like maybe not.
There are some
There's a
studies.
lot of studies showing a link between lifestyle, between nutrition in
Nutrition.
particular, and depression. So you know, while we sort of understand this, don't shame and blame people. It's sort of like in Australia, the issue with breast cancer. We want to be out there and tell women what they can do to reduce their risk of breast cancer. And they're super healthy, never eaten anything bad, work out all the time, relative who got breast cancer. Or, sorry, that was a really bad luck case. But that shouldn't stop us worrying that someone might feel some shame, shouldn't stop us from telling the truth to the rest of the population. You know, for example, that alcohol is a human breast carcinogen.
And was there something you want to add about what you read on Sunday morning, which I'm now forgetting what it was? It was to do with the pushback. Somebody, a dietitian, newspaper writing about protein, was it? Anyway, we see
The
lots
other
of
pushback, the other
examples.
pushback is there's mysteriously, as more and more information comes out, sort of um, informing us, providing data that eating plant-based diets is much better for many aspects of health. That there seems to be qualities about meat and eggs and other animal protein, other animal products that worsen our health. And you know, one of my medical magazines about a week or so ago had a sponsored link about protein intake. It was not influenced at all by the Egg Nutrition Council. It was independently written. And you know, when you read articles like this, they often talk about, you know, quality protein. You know, are people getting enough quality protein? You know, that term quality protein actually went out a long time ago, but the industry's brought it back again. And then there's been a number of articles, you know, sort of criticizing, you know, plant-based dairy alternatives. Like, you know, some of those plant-based milks have far less calcium than cow's milk does, and less protein. Yeah, actually, human breast milk does too, but um, yeah. So we do. There is quite a lot of pushback in our media, in the doctors' media. Um, you know, both from industry influence sources, and from people who don't want to hear bad news about their culture, about their belief that these we'll call them protein foods. We shouldn't really. That these animal products are, you know, a necessary quality food.
Okay, shall we move on to some more questions?
I think we should move on to questions.
So we had a question about sodium intake. And so, you know, if someone is eating whole food plant-based diet, not adding any salt or the high, you know, sort of sodium condiments like soy sauce, tamari, miso and things,
Bread.
and not eating bread or very little, you know, is that a problem? Can you have too low a sodium intake? So what's your take on that, Malcolm?
You know, the general answer would be no. This is, you know, humans evolved to eat this sort of food and to be, you know, salt conserving machines. Um, And the actual essential, requirement for salt for humans is very low, but the actual recommendation is a little bit higher than the absolute minimum. Like I said, I think the recommendation is 500 milligrams a day, isn't it? Versus the absolute requirement is only 160 or something. There might be situations where a little bit more sodium is warranted. Various medications. If the person, has, is getting fluid loss through diarrhea. I tried not to say diarrhea, Jenny. If the person's, getting episodes of diarrhea, if the person's, you do get adaptation to sweating, and sweat's generally much lower in sodium than people used to think. And if you become more heat acclimatized, then the sweat will get quite low in sodium. But there are some losses, and particularly during the transition phases, and when we sort of suddenly throw ourselves into hotter climates we're not accustomed to. But don't take salt tablets or think that you need to eat a whole lot of salt. The sort of increased needs from heavy sweating in people who are not thoroughly adapted to sweating and in the whilst on a low salt diet. There may be some modest increases in sodium needs. Imagine it sort of only be a few hundred milligrams a day. It's not sort of going to be 1,000 milligrams it's not going to be a teaspoon of sodium a day. So, if you're someone who's thinking, look, I'm training, I'm sweating a lot, or I have that little toilet problem I don't want to talk about, and I just wonder if I'm losing more sodium, you could add a few, condiments and breads to your diet. I'd be looking at it though, and just sort of thinking, yeah, I could add a few hundred milligrams of sodium per day, but not teaspoonsful. And if you're getting cramps, it's probably not from sodium deficiency. Most likely thing is that we've either worked the muscles too much or not enough, or dehydration is often a factor. And I think we're talking about hydration. It sort of needs to be an ongoing thing. I don't think you can sort of go, well, at the end of my day of not enough drinking and things, I drank a litre. That may not have replenished, put things back in balance throughout the body. That might take a bit longer or take a sort of more sustained approach to adequate fluid intake.
Okay, and the other question that we had the other day was, are there discernible benefits for people who suffer with autoimmune issues such as psoriatic arthritis? And there was a note about asking for someone who is going to want to know the data, someone with a scientific idea. So there's quite a bit of published research with rheumatoid arthritis. And so, there is data, and we've got a web page on inflammatory arthritis where we link to some of those.
And some of the more recent ones, there was a Dutch randomized controlled trial with rheumatoid arthritis that got some very positive results in terms of reduced joint inflammation scales. They did this quite methodically. They didn't just ask people how their joints were going. And then there was another study that looked at sort of the inflammatory nature of the diet. There's having a score for how inflammatory the diet was. And they found that people with a more inflammatory diet did worse.
And one of the things with scientific studies isn't all that we go by. There's clinical experience, and there's clinical experience of numerous, particularly plant-based doctors, and our own clinical experience of working with people. Malcolm working through his GP practice and at our immersions. So we've had people with rheumatoid, we've had a range of autoimmune conditions. And the thing is that for most people, you have to have very high adherence to a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet to get results. And we sort of say, Malcolm has this message at the end of the week that, it's if you're not not getting results, it's actually a really positive. There's possibly more you can do. And again, it's not meant to shame people, not meant to sort of say, oh, well, you mustn't be doing it right. There are tweaks that, particularly with something like rheumatoid arthritis.
Well, it can be like that little bit of oil. The foods that you sort of didn't realize were quite salty, and little things like that, or not enough of some of the more anti-inflammatory foods. And when we talk about the research, and there's some randomized controlled trials, and there's some clinical experience, there's also a lot of mechanistic stuff, like looking at what whole plant foods do to the gut microbiome and how that alters the immune response, how sodium causes certain types of T cells to sort of transform into the more inflammatory type in joints. So there's a lot of little bits and pieces of different types of scientific investigation that we can sort of pull together, and it's consistent. Like if we sort of had to sort of imagine, and it's like, well, that's funny because that seems to improve people, but the science on the details of what that food does suggests it should make things worse. Well, that's not the case. Generally speaking, some of the foods and patterns that seem to get good results, there's data sort of finding that they have positive effects on the of the mechanisms that the body uses to keep itself in good health.
Okay. Do we have any links to sodium and T cell function? Well, there actually is a paper that's on our arthritis page. There's a couple that relate to arthritis, inflammatory arthritis, and autoimmune conditions.
There's some quite strong data looking at, is that one down there? No, it's not. Looking at rats. Oh no, I shouldn't have said that because my cavoodle will go nuts if he hears the R word. There's some studies on rats, where they did the sort of nitty gritty, look down at the fine details. In humans, though, they have done some sort of correlation type studies that look at this, that have looked at joint inflammation and sodium intake, but obviously not as detailed and controlled a study as you can do with a cage full of unfortunate rodents.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions you want to ask us before we say good night? Live stream that thankfully worked, and we're very grateful to all of you who have made comments and also that have ticked the like button, because it tells us that we've got an audience engaged, which is what we want. Okay, so Melinda wants to ask about a gluten allergy.
Well, there is celiac disease. There's probably 1% or less of people. There are some other issues with, there are actually a few more people who have some sort of gluten intolerance, non-celiac. There are people out there who sort of blame gluten for a lot of disease. We don't really think they have very strong data, but gluten is sort of a somewhat hard to break down indigestion protein, and it's often recommended that when people have gut problems, including autoimmune disease, often sort of has a bit of a basis in the gut, that part of the initial healing of the gut might exclude gluten. I think the jury's still out to some extent, but so I'd always say first step, do a low-fat, low-salt, whole foods, plant-based diet with plenty of leafy greens and protective foods. If your arthritis, joint pain is still not settling down, you might need to take it a step further, and perhaps one of those other steps might be eliminating the gluten grains, at least for a period of time.
We've got a section on our website on gut health, including a page on elimination diets and also on reintroducing, haven't you? You've got a page on sort of restoring gut health. So yeah, certainly, gluten is one of those that it seems to work with people, laying off it for a while. But we hear reports that when someone has improved their health, that often they can start eating these things again without any issue. So there's plenty of other grains that you can enjoy, and yeah, that's maybe worth trying. But also make sure that all the other things are cut out of someone's diet, the dairy and things like that.
Yeah, and someone asked about tips for diet for in relation to breast cancer. Yeah, you don't want to be eating foods with hormones in them like cow's milk. You do want to be eating foods that sort of down-regulate hormones and things like soy products. I think a good reference for that would be Christy Funk's book, Breasts, the owner's manual. She's a breast surgeon in the US and has a website called Pink Lotus. She's got a lot of great information there.
We link to some of her information on. We've got a page on a section on cancer and particularly on breast cancer, where we link to quite a few resources. And the other question that you missed is after diarrhea, how to reintroduce fibre gently.
I'd be saying you'd be introducing just some of the basic starchy food like potatoes, rice. If you've got an upset tummy, you even eat white rice, don't you? So, things like potatoes, rice, maybe you'd sort of leave the beans till a bit later. You, I think if you're someone who loves fruit and tolerates a lot of fruit, you could probably eat some fruit. If you're recovering from diarrhea and you eat more food, you will tend to excrete more. That only makes sense. It's not always an advantage, though, to have a long period of fasting when recovering from it.
I think we've covered all the questions now. So yes, I mean anyone who you have a more in-depth question, you can always make an appointment with Malcolm. He does telehealth right around Australia. We also run 4-part webinar series a few times a year. We've got our next one starting mid-April, and can always join us at one of our immersions. We've got one starting on Sunday. We just had a cancellation, so we're thinking, I wish we had more of you coming.
We do, because it's not full this time. We do have room for last minute enrolments. We have had someone who contacted us once on a Friday and organised it on the Saturday and turned up on the Sunday. But usually people give us more warning. But we still take new people right up to the last minute when we've got places available.
Yeah. Anyway, we better say goodnight. And so thanks all for joining us. And we'll do this again and we can be more confident next time that we know how to do it right using this software. So thanks for coming back again for those of you who tried to find us on Sunday night. And we'll say goodnight. So yeah, nice to see all your names. Thank you, Claire, Judy, Lisa, Melinda. Thanks very much. Okay, good night.
Good night.